They told you Horus was just a myth, another god in a forgotten pantheon. But what if I told you the story of Horus isn't fiction? It's a spiritual blueprint, a symbolic code hidden in plain sight. This isn't about ancient Egypt, it's about you. From the moment you were born, you've been surrounded by fragments of a story you were never taught to read. A divine child born of death and magic. A war between light and chaos. An eye torn out to see beyond illusion. This is not mythology. This is your forgotten memory. The battle of Horus and Set is not a relic of the past. It's the war that still rages inside you every day. And until you understand the myth for what it truly is, you will continue to mistake the call of your soul for a story that doesn't belong to you. But it does. It always has. You are not here to learn history. You are here to remember. Before Horus could rise, Osiris had to fall. That's how it begins. Not with triumph, but with betrayal, fragmentation, and death. Osiris, once the wise and just king, was torn apart by his own brother, Set, dismembered and scattered. His body was broken into pieces, and his reign was plunged into darkness. But this was not the end. It was the beginning of something sacred, because while Set celebrated the collapse of divine order, Isis, the sacred feminine, moved in silence. She did not mourn. She remembered, piece by piece. She gathered the scattered parts of Osiris, breathing life back into the dead. Through her magic, her knowledge, she resurrected him. Not as a king of the earth, but as the lord of the underworld. And from this act of divine love and power, Horus was born. Horus was not born of life. He was born of transcended death. He is the child of mystery and resurrection, the spark that arises after everything else has collapsed. That's what makes his birth special. Horus is not just a figure in a story. He is a symbol of what is born inside you after destruction, after loss, after the ego crumbles and the old world ends. He is that part of you that is conceived not in safety, but in sacred chaos. And that is the first truth they never told you. Horus does not appear when everything is perfect. He arrives when your world has been torn apart. He is the rebirth within the wreckage. In spiritual terms, Horus is the awakened self, the part of you that can only be born when the false self dies. Just as Osiris had to be destroyed, your illusions, attachments, and superficial identity often have to break for the higher self to come forward. Horus is the child of this breaking. Not your ruin, but your rebirth. And Isis, the one who made his birth possible, is not just a goddess in a book. She is the symbol of your inner wisdom, your intuition, your connection to divine feminine power. She remembers what you have forgotten, and it is through her that Horus is born within you. But there is a reason this story was wrapped in symbolism. The ancient Egyptians did not write manuals, they wrote myths. Because myths can hide truth in plain sight, and protect it from those who would misuse it. Osiris represents your divine nature, Set, your chaotic impulses and ego, Isis, your inner healer, and Horus, the rising light, the awakened true self. This was not superstition. It was a spiritual map, a technology of transformation. The myth of Horus is not linear. It spirals, just like your own growth. You will experience it again and again in different forms. Every time you lose yourself, suffer a fall, feel shattered, or wander in darkness, you are reliving Osiris. And every time something stirs within you and says, "This is not the end, I will rise," you are meeting Horus. This story is not meant to entertain you, it is meant to activate you. You are the myth playing out in real time. The ancient Egyptians did not worship Horus as a god because they needed something to fear. They revered him because they saw what he represented. The potential to rise above death, above chaos, above the programmed mind that keeps you in chains. Horus is a living force within the human spirit, waiting to be remembered, not followed, to be embodied. You don't need to believe in gods or hieroglyphs to live this truth. You only need to look at your own life. Where have you died? Where have you been dismembered? Cast into confusion, grief, or failure? It is there that Isis begins her work. And if you listen closely, you will hear the stirring of something inside you that refuses to remain broken. That is Horus. The war between Horus and Set did not take place in the heavens. It takes place inside you every single day. You have been taught to see mythology as something distant, disconnected from your life. But these stories were not written for entertainment. They were written to reflect the inner landscape of your soul. And the story of Horus is not about a battle fought long ago between two gods. It is about the ongoing war between your higher self and the forces that want to keep you asleep. Set represents more than chaos. He is your lower nature, the voice of fear, greed, jealousy, domination, and impulse. He is the unchecked ego. He does not come with horns. He whispers through your need to control, to lash out, to take what is not yours, to put yourself above others at any cost. Set is the drive to survive, at the expense of everything sacred. And Horus, born of resurrection, is the part of you that knows there is another way. He is not just fighting Set, he is fighting the part of himself that is vulnerable to becoming Set. That is why their battle is so complex. It is not just light versus dark. It is a test of identity. Set did not kill Osiris out of hatred alone. He wanted the throne. He wanted control over the divine order. And isn't that what the ego does? It wants to rule your mind, your emotions, your life. It hijacks your purpose and turns it into ambition. It poisons your clarity with desire. It does not want you awake. It wants you reactive, wounded, and consumed by distraction. That's what Set does best. He fragments, he divides, he thrives on imbalance. The ancient myth describes Horus and Set, fighting for years with no clear victor. It was not a quick war, and neither is yours. You may feel you have made progress, only to be pulled back into old habits, old fears, old patterns. That is part of the process. Spiritual awakening is not a switch you flip. It is a fight, a daily one. The ego does not give up its throne willingly. It must be outgrown, challenged, and ultimately transmuted. And here is the part most people miss. Horus does not win by completely destroying Set. In the ancient version, Horus defeats Set. Yes, but Set is not killed. He is integrated. In some retellings, Set is placed on Ra's solar bark and made to guard it in the underworld. What does this mean? It means that the very force that once ruled through chaos is now placed in service to the divine order. Not suppressed, not annihilated, but redirected. This is spiritual maturity. It is not about pretending the shadow does not exist. It is about using it consciously. Your rage can become courage. Your desire can become devotion. Your ambition can become service. The parts of you that once served your ego can serve your soul, if you have the discipline to face them without flinching. The battle of Horus and Set is the longest war you will ever fight, because it is not fought on the outside. It is fought in your reactions, your choices, your silence, your temptations. It is in how you speak to people when you are tired. It is in whether you show up when no one is watching. It is in those small moments when Set tries to reclaim the throne and Horus quietly resists. You do not need a sword. You need awareness. And just as in the myth, there will be moments when it seems Set is winning. You will fall, doubt yourself, act from your wounds. But every time you realign, every time you choose presence over impulse, truth over ego, stillness over chaos, you reaffirm the throne of Horus within you. This war does not end with a single victory. It ends when the chaos inside you no longer runs the show. When your shadow becomes your teacher, not your master, that is when the inner kingdom is restored, and Horus, the divine child of resurrection, finally takes his rightful place. When Horus fought Set, he lost his eye, not just in battle, but in meaning, because the eye of Horus is not just an ancient symbol, it is a forgotten key, a message carved in stone, passed through temples, whispered through time. They called it the Wedjat, the eye that sees beyond the physical, the eye that does not just look, but perceives. And when you understand it, truly understand it, you begin to realize that what you thought was just a myth is actually one of the most advanced spiritual metaphors ever recorded. In the myth, Set gouges out Horus's left eye, the lunar eye, the intuitive one. But Thoth, the god of wisdom and sacred measurement, restores it, not by returning it to its original state, but by making it whole again. It is repaired, transformed, enlightened. The message is that vision, lost in the chaos of life, can be restored, but not the same, better, stronger, more awake. The Eye of Horus is not just a religious image. It mirrors the structure of the human brain. Scientists and mystics have long noted how the eye, when broken down into its parts, visually corresponds to the pineal gland, the thalamus, and the limbic system. This is the spiritual seat of perception, what many traditions call the third eye. The ancients did not stumble upon this symbol by accident. They encoded inner truth into visual form. They gave us a map of consciousness. When your third eye is closed, you are blind to more than just visions. You are blind to the truth. You walk through life seeing only the surface, chasing desires that never satisfy, obeying systems that do not serve you, repeating patterns you cannot explain. You think you are awake because your eyes are open, but you are moving through a dream that someone else wrote. That is what the Eye of Horus represents, awakening from the lie. The world you live in was not designed to nurture this kind of vision. It feeds the physical eyes with distractions, media, status, noise, while the inner eye starves. From childhood, you are taught to trust only what can be measured, repeated, explained. But the Eye of Horus does not operate on logic. It operates on knowledge, intuition, symbol, pattern. And when it begins to open in you, the world ceases to look random. It begins to reveal itself. You start to notice synchronicities that are too precise to be coincidence. You see how stories, archetypes, and emotions repeat in cycles. You begin to sense when something is wrong, even if you can't explain it. This is the return of the eye. It is not magic. It is perception, freed from the prison of purely physical awareness. And it changes everything. In the myth, the restored Eye of Horus becomes more powerful than before. Not just because it sees more, but because it sees truly. And isn't that what we are all searching for? Not more information, but clarity. The ability to cut through illusion and see the pattern beneath the noise. The truth hidden beneath appearances. This is why the Eye of Horus became a symbol of protection, healing, and power. Because when your vision returns, so does your sovereignty. You stop reacting blindly. You start moving intentionally. You become less like a victim of fate and more like an observer of a grand unfolding. You are not separate from the divine. You are staring it in the face in every moment. But there is a reason this truth is not taught in schools or shown in mainstream culture. Because people with awakened vision do not follow blindly. They question. They see systems for what they are. They trust themselves. And that is dangerous to any structure built on control. The Eye of Horus is not watching you. It is in you. And every time you stop and listen to your inner knowledge, every time you trust your intuition over the noise, you honor it. You remember, you see not with the eyes of the world, but with the vision of the soul. At some point, you must stop asking what the myth means and start asking what it reveals about you. Because the story of Horus was not written to entertain. It was encoded to awaken. It does not exist to give you historical facts or religious doctrine. It exists to hold a mirror to your soul, to reflect everything you have forgotten about who you are and what you are capable of. When you stop seeing Horus as a figure outside yourself and start recognizing him as a force within you, everything changes. Horus is the part of you that remembers, the part of you that refuses to die, even when everything else is collapsing. When you hit your lowest point, when you are broken, grieving, questioning the meaning of it all, and something deep inside whispers, "This is not the end," that is Horus. When you are surrounded by noise, confusion, chaos, and yet you feel a thread pulling you toward the light, that is Horus. He is not just a god on a temple wall. He is the voice that survives the storm. And this is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a living reality. The myth does not give you answers. It does not tell you what to do. It gives you a structure, a way to understand the inner journey through symbolic events. The betrayal of Osiris is the betrayal you felt when life did not go as you expected. The dismemberment is every time you felt scattered, lost, torn apart by pain. The search of Isis is the part of you that seeks meaning, even when it hurts. The birth of Horus is your first moment of awakening, when you realize that perhaps there is more to this life than survival and the battle with Set. That is the long fight to remain conscious in a world that rewards numbness. The reason myths like this survive for thousands of years is that they are not tied to a culture or era. They are tied to the human experience. They are not external stories. They are internal maps. You live them cyclically, over and over again. Every descent, every return, every rebirth. Horus is not a distant god. He is your higher self in disguise. The version of you that exists beyond fear, beyond control, beyond programming. And that is what makes this dangerous. Because once you recognize yourself in the myth, you cease to be controllable. You stop defining yourself by labels, status, or what the world tells you to want. You realize that you are not here to play small. You are here to remember something sacred, something powerful, something ancient. You are not just a body. You are a soul that agreed to forget in order to remember. This is the true initiation. Not into a religion, but into your true self. The world around you is built to make you forget. Constant stimulation, constant noise, endless distractions that pull you away from the quiet, still place within where your Horus nature lives. But it is always there, waiting. You do not need to earn it. You simply need to uncover it. Every myth, when properly understood, is a code, a language of the soul. That is why you can feel something stir within you when you hear these stories. Even if you cannot explain it, your soul recognizes the truth before your mind does. That is the power of the archetype. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to your essence. And Horus is one of the most powerful archetypes we have, not because he is perfect, but because he remembers who he is. And so must you. Without Isis, there is no Horus. Without the divine feminine, there is no resurrection. One cannot speak of awakening, ascension, or spiritual power without honoring the one who gathered the broken, who remembered what others had forgotten, and who created life not through domination, but through sacred intention. Isis is not just the mother of Horus. She is the embodiment of wisdom, intuition, and spiritual sovereignty. And yet, like many aspects of divine feminine power, she has been dismissed, buried under layers of myth and misunderstanding. But make no mistake, she is central to the entire journey. In the myth, it is Isis who searches for Osiris after he is torn apart. She does not wait for someone to save him. She does not curse the world or fall into despair. She acts. She weaves together what was broken. She uses her magic, her memory, her voice, her devotion, and from that devotion she restores life. She does not resurrect Osiris as he was, but transforms him into something new. And from this union, Horus is conceived. Not through violence or conquest, but through divine will and sacred energy. That alone should tell you everything about the power of the feminine in ancient Egyptian spirituality. It was not passive, it was formative. Isis is the keeper of memory, the one who holds the blueprint of what has been lost. In spiritual terms, she represents the part of you that never forgets the truth, no matter how much the world tries to overwrite it. Even when your soul feels dismembered, scattered across disappointments, traumas, failures, there is a force within you that is still gathering the pieces, still holding the vision of wholeness, still believing in resurrection. That is Isis in every human being, regardless of gender. Isis exists as that sacred inner knowledge, that voice that says you are not your pain, that part of you that creates healing through presence, through love, through remembering who you were before the world tried to change you. And while Horus may be the symbol of the awakened self, it is Isis who midwives that awakening into reality. She gives birth to the light not from hope, but from knowledge, from remembrance. It is no coincidence that her name, Isis, is linguistically connected to the words throne and seat, because she is the throne upon which the divine order is restored. She is the inner seat of power. And in your own journey, this throne must be reclaimed, because awakening is not just about spiritual insight. It is about restoring the balance between the masculine and feminine within you, between action and intuition, structure and flow, will and wisdom. The suppression of the feminine was not just a cultural shift, it was a spiritual weapon. Because when the divine feminine is forgotten, so is the path to true power. You end up with systems built on control, domination, exploitation, and what is lost is healing, connection, vision. Without Isis, you get ego without soul, structure without spirit. But the feminine never disappears. It waits, it whispers, it remembers. And when you are ready, it shows you the way back. Isis is the part of you that already knows why you came here, but is waiting for you to be still enough to hear it. She does not shout over the noise, she waits beneath it. And when you finally start listening, you will realize that she has been guiding you all along. To embrace Isis is to reconnect with the sacred. It is to honor the unseen, the intuitive, the magical. It is to stop chasing and start aligning. The modern world tells you that power is loud, aggressive, visible. But Isis teaches you that true power is magnetic. It attracts, it heals, it gives birth. It does not dominate, it transforms. And that is the lesson of the myth. To awaken Horus, you must remember Isis. To rise to clarity, you must pass through the sacred waters of remembrance. This is the path not of conquest, but of reclamation. The divine feminine does not beg to be seen, it simply is. And once you see her, you begin to see yourself not as broken or lost, but as part of something ancient, whole, and utterly unshakable. The story of Horus is not just a myth, it is an initiation. Every stage of his journey mirrors the stages of spiritual awakening, the death and rebirth of the soul, the climb from unconsciousness to clarity. This path was not created to be admired from a distance. It was created to be walked not by priests in temples or prophets in history books, but by you. In ancient Egypt, initiates learned not by memorizing facts. They learned through ritual, through symbol, through direct experience. The mysteries of Horus, Osiris, and Isis were not bedtime stories. They were the scaffolding for inner transformation. To be initiated meant to walk through symbolic death, to descend into the underworld of one's own psyche, and to rise reborn not with new beliefs, but with new sight. This is what Horus represents. Not blind faith, but earned vision. He does not become the rightful heir of Osiris simply because he was born to it. He becomes it by enduring the trials, the chaos, the war. He earns the throne by facing what most would run from. And so do you. The path of light is not easy. It never has been. Because light does not just illuminate, it exposes. When you begin to awaken, everything you have been avoiding comes into focus. Your fears, your conditioning, your attachments, the parts of you that still serve, set. Awakening is rarely comfortable. It is disorienting. You begin to see the lies you have lived within, about who you are, what success looks like, what love is, what matters. And when that illusion shatters, the real work begins. In the mystery schools, this process was known as the crucible, a space of pressure, friction, and alchemy. The self must be broken apart to be put back together. The ego must be humbled. The seeker must become empty enough to receive. This is not about chasing enlightenment like a prize. It is about shedding everything that is not true until only the essence remains. The modern world has hijacked the idea of awakening. It sells you the surface, crystals, slogans, aesthetic spirituality without the deep depth it requires. True initiation costs everything that is not real. It demands that you let go of the identities that keep you comfortable but small. It asks for your willingness to enter the unknown without a guarantee. Like Horus, you must face the darkness not to escape it, but to integrate it. There is no shortcut, no hack, no bypass. Awakening is a path you walk barefoot, with wide open eyes, and illusions falling like ash behind you. It is raw, it is sacred, and it is yours. Horus walks this path not just to win, but to become. He moves through betrayal, injury, isolation, and ultimately, clarity. And in this process, he ceases to be a boy seeking justice and becomes a sovereign being rooted in truth. That is the transformation. not from weak to strong, but from scattered to whole, from reactive to conscious, from identity to essence. And this is where most people turn back. Because right before awakening, there is always resistance. The mind clings to the known. The ego resists annihilation. But the truth, what waits on the other side, is not destruction. It is return. Return to what you have always been beneath the programming, the trauma, the fear. You are not becoming something new. You are remembering something ancient, something buried under years of forgetting. And every time you choose presence over impulse, every time you breathe instead of reacting, every time you listen to that still voice within, rather than the noise outside, you take another step on the path of Horus. Initiation is not a ceremony you attend. It is a fire you survive. It is the moment you realize you cannot go back to sleep, because now you have tasted the truth, and it will not let you rest. And that is a gift, because once you have seen, you cannot unsee. And once you remember who you are, the throne you are chasing outside yourself is revealed to have always been within you. The story of Horus is a myth, but myth does not mean untrue. It means encoded. The ancients did not speak literally. They spoke in layers, in symbols, in frequencies. Myth was their language of initiation, a way to embed spiritual technology in stories that could be passed down through generations without losing their power. On the surface, Horus is a falcon-headed god who battles Set. But beneath this lies something else entirely. It is a blueprint, a multi-dimensional map of consciousness, death, rebirth, and divine order. The story was not just about Egypt. It was about the soul. Ancient myths were not created randomly. They were built like architecture with geometry, intention, and resonance. They contained harmonics, truths that would echo through time. The characters were never just characters. Osiris is consciousness before fragmentation. Set is entropy, ego, chaos. Isis is memory, magic, and integration. Horus is the child of it all, the light that returns after darkness. And if you look closely, you will see that this structure does not just exist in Egyptian lore. It repeats. In Greek mythology, you see Dionysus, born of a divine father, dismembered and reconstituted. In Christian tradition, Jesus dies and is reborn, the son of a holy mother and a father from above, locked in conflict with worldly powers. In Hindu stories, Krishna and Rama embody divine truth, battling illusion. These are not coincidences. These are patterns, archetypes, echoing across cultures, time, and languages. Why? Because the human soul evolves through story. And the deepest stories are not written, they are remembered. This is what we mean when we say reality is holographic. Every part reflects the whole. The myth of Horus does not just explain the spiritual path, it is the spiritual path. Over and over again, it plays out in your life. Destruction, fragmentation, memory, resurrection, war, illumination. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Your inner life mirrors the myth, and the myth mirrors the structure of the cosmos. This is why the ancients did not separate science, philosophy, and spirituality. For them, it was all one system, a sacred order. Modern life has stripped this away. It has told you that stories are make-believe, that gods are fantasies, that myths are primitive relics. But maybe they said that because they no longer understood how to read them. Or maybe they knew exactly what they were hiding. Because when you understand how to decipher a myth, you stop being a passive participant in life. You start becoming the architect, the observer, the initiate. The myth of Horus contains hermetic laws, even if they are not named. As above, so below, mirrored in the battle between the heavens and the earthly realm. The principle of polarity, Horus and Set, light and dark. The principle of rhythm, death and resurrection, day and night, loss and return. These are not just metaphysical ideas. They are experiences you have lived through without realizing it. When Horus loses his eye and regains it, he does not just recover something, he evolves. The eye is returned by Thoth, symbol of divine wisdom and sacred geometry. This means that awareness comes not from brute force, but from higher knowledge. That is the code. You do not reclaim your inner sight by fighting harder. You reclaim it by perceiving deeper. Every part of this story has meaning. Even the way the Eye of Horus was broken into 6 parts, each representing a fraction and a sense: sight, hearing, taste, touch, thought, and smell. The wholeness of perception. The myth tells you that wholeness is not just spiritual. It is sensory, mental, embodied. You awaken not just by thinking differently, but by experiencing differently. This is why the ancients carved these stories in stone. Because even when memory fades, symbols remain, and symbols speak directly to the subconscious, bypassing all layers of logic and defense. The myth of Horus is not trying to convince you of anything. It is inviting you to remember something you already know. And in a world that constantly tries to make you forget your power, your path, your purpose, remembering is a revolutionary act. To read a myth is to read yourself. And the more you understand how to see beyond the literal, the more you begin to notice the code running through everything. Nature, numbers, story, emotion, even suffering. You were never meant to just hear the myth. You were meant to embody it. The temples were schools, the gods were archetypes, the stories were rituals, and your life is not separate from any of it. You are a walking symbol, a living myth. And now that you have remembered, the only question left is what you will do with it. The return of Horus is not something that happened once. It is something that continues to happen every time a soul chooses to wake up. Not everyone does. Some remain lost in the noise, trapped in the illusion, hypnotized by the surface of life. But some remember, they feel the stirring within, the sense that something sacred is buried beneath the chaos. And when that memory awakens, so does Horus. To reclaim the inner eye is to choose vision over blindness. Not physical vision, but the kind that sees with the soul. The eye that pierces through distraction, ego, and deception to perceive the underlying truth. The third eye, the Eye of Horus, the seat of divine perception. It is not a fantasy or some new age cliché. It is a faculty you have always possessed, but were taught to forget. It is what allows you to sense alignment, to feel when something is wrong, to know when something is true before the mind has caught up. And in a world that thrives on confusion, that kind of sight is revolutionary. This return begins quietly. You start to withdraw from the false identities you have worn, those shaped by other people's expectations, by systems that never had your best interests at heart. You stop chasing validation and start seeking alignment. You begin to notice how much of your life has been built around keeping the ego comfortable, rather than the soul awake. And little by little, that inner eye begins to open. First as a whisper, then as a pattern, then as a presence that will not let you go back to who you were. You start to feel your way through life, not just think your way through it. You trust your gut, even when it contradicts logic. You sense truth in symbols, in synchronicities, in moments that seem random but strike you like messages. You see through the systems and stories that used to hold you captive. You do not just wake up, you stay awake. And in that state, the world looks different, not softer, not easier, but real. This is Horus returning to the throne, not as mythology, but as consciousness. And that throne is not out there. It is within you. It is the state of being where your awareness governs your actions, where clarity rules over chaos, where sovereignty replaces survival. But make no mistake, this is not a final destination. Horus does not return once and stay forever. He must be chosen over and over, because Set never completely disappears. The ego will still whisper. The chaos will still knock. The system will still try to pull you back into numbness. The throne is never given. It must be claimed daily through stillness, through presence, through truth. And in this process, you begin to change your life from the inside out. You no longer live reactively. You live intentionally, not because you are chasing perfection, but because you are committed to remembering your essence, your purpose, your inner order. And that is what it means to be awake. Not to be perfect, but to be presentfully, consciously, courageously present in a world designed to keep you distracted. This is the return of Horus, not as a god on a wall, but as awareness within. as the light that cannot be bought, tamed, or silenced. And when that light returns to your life, it does not scream, it does not beg for attention. It simply sits on the throne, quiet, clear, and unshakable. You begin to speak differently, move differently, love differently. Not because you are trying to prove anything, but because you have remembered who you are. You have returned to the seat of power you never truly lost, only forgot. Horus does not live in temples. He lives in you, and every time you choose presence over programming, purpose over performance, sovereignty over submission, he returns. You were never just listening to a story. You were being handed a map, a coded transmission passed through time not to entertain you, but to awaken you. The myth of Horus was never about gods in the sky or ancient rituals locked in temples. It was always about the soul, about your journey, about what happens when you forget who you are and what it takes to remember. And here you are, standing at the edge of that remembering. This is not mythology, this is initiation. Every step Horus took, you have taken in your own way. You have known what it means to lose. You have been torn apart, betrayed, disoriented. You have wandered in your own deserts of confusion. And yet, something in you never stopped searching. Something in you still believes there is something more. That is not naivety. That is the ancient fire that has burned in seekers since the beginning of time. Those who look beyond the surface. Those who will not settle for a life that feels scripted and numb. Those who hear truth in silence, in symbols, in stories like this one. You are not here by accident. These words did not find you by chance. Deep down, you already know that, because something in this story did not just inform you. It stirred you. It reminded you. It echoed through your bones, through your intuition, through that feeling you get when something resonates so deeply it bypasses logic. That is not emotion. That is recognition. You recognized yourself in Horus because the myth lives in you. The descent into fragmentation, the search for meaning, the spiritual rebirth, the battle with the ego, the return of the inner I is all part of your unfolding. The story did not happen once, it is happening now. And you are not just a character in it. You are the one holding the pen. The modern world would have you believe that power lives outside you in systems, titles, appearances, institutions. But ancient truths like this one remind you that the most powerful journey is inward. That the highest throne is not in a palace. It is in your mind. And when you sit on that throne with awareness, integrity, and vision, the external begins to bend around the internal. That is the secret that no one told you. The story of Horus is not about fate. It is about alignment. There is no longer any need to chase the light. You are the light. The challenge is to stop dimming it to fit into a world built for amnesia. The more you remember, the less you comply, the less you shrink. The less you tolerate systems that feed your ego but starve your soul. And if you have made it this far, it is because something inside you refuses to go back to sleep. That part of you is sacred. Feed it, honor it, keep going deeper. You were never lost. You are walking the map in your own way. You do not need to become Horus. You already are, and now you have remembered the path. The only question left is whether you will walk it fully. Whether you will hold that vision when the world tries to pull you back into illusion. Whether you will keep your eye open. The throne is yours, but it will only hold your weight if you bring your truth with you.